This video gives you a brief timeline overview of the Back in Shape program in its entirety. We're going to walk you through phase 1, 2, 3, finishing up in phase 4 via the flexibility program. So hopefully this will give you a real flavor of what's to come and how we'll take you through that journey to getting your back in shape for good. Many of you that have come to Back in Shape have come through phase 1, and that is a foundational element for the entirety of the Back in Shape program. It stems all the way from phase 1, but is included in part or in whole as we go through the entirety of the Back in Shape program, and I'll discuss why it is so important in 3 simple steps. Step number 1 is learning a simple core engagement. This is so vital because it is used throughout the entirety of the program. If we can't grasp the effectiveness and the action of doing this core engagement, then all future exercises, whether inside or outside of the Back in Shape program, are fundamentally not going to be doing the job that they need to do. So take time. Sometimes you'll get it like that. For other people, it's maybe a bit more of a challenge and takes a little bit of time until you reach that aha moment. Number 2 is stretching technique. The stretches play an important role and they have a different purpose depending on which part of the Back in Shape program that you're in. Right now, in phase 1, you're going to be doing them around about 30 seconds, maybe 60 seconds tops, just to maintain mobility in the hips, and there's plenty of video material on why and how that works. But later on, we need to be able to continually do these stretches in a way that is going to be advantageous for the phase that we're in. Really cue here the flexibility program. We're doing things in a slightly different way. But the overarching principle around those stretches is that they're done in a way that is safe and sensible for your back. Many of the ones that we refer to you will have done in some capacity before, in some nuanced different way, but it's those nuanced changes that are really so important when you've got back pain, to make sure that we do it in the right way, with the right technique, avoiding placing unnecessary strain on that lower back. The third part is that really integral part that rounds off phase 1 so nicely, which is the nice combination of towel and ice. And that towel is decompressing. It's taking your lumbar spine and taking the load off, supporting it in its natural and innate position whilst having equal pressure through the right parts of the spine, and invariably taking the pressure off those ever so compressed discs that are subject to all sorts of stresses on a day in, day out basis under the load of gravity with bad posture or even just sitting. It really is a vital part of the Back in Shape program, and learning to do this exercise and feeding it in, although it's going to be a little bit difficult in the first instances, there are plenty of adaptations we can use which are inside the program that will really help you get into this exercise, which is a vital one for not only your Back in Shape process, but for spine health and hygiene for the long term. And that obviously includes the addition of icing to help control excess inflammation, understanding that inflammation is actually a normal process and imperative if we are to heal effectively. But in the confined spaces of the lumbar spine and all the little bits where nerves are popping out here and there through those exit foramina or in the central canal, we need to have a control or a lid on excess inflammation, as too much in that region can really spell disaster and lead us to have real flare-ups in our pain. So the icing and how to ice and why to ice and when to ice is again such an important part of the Back in Shape process. And that is really those 3 parts in a nutshell. The real next question is, how long should you stay in this phase? How long should you be doing phase 1? Well, we find it helpful to evaluate the daily tasks first. And no, we will have videos on this if they're already out on the website as you're watching this video. But knowing that the task of getting up and down off the toilet, getting in and out of your chair, in and out of bed, emptying the dishwasher and going down the stairs, all of these tasks place vastly more stress and strain on your body in an uncontrolled, unrefined manner compared to the phase 2 exercises that are often so daunting, or the prospect of moving up to those is so daunting a task. So please bear that in mind. If you are able to be up and move around the house, you're not bedbound, then progression is imperative. It's so important to make that step into phase 2. It's a vital part. It's the only part, or the first part, where we start to get real change that lasts. And we've got plenty of help and support inside the Back in Shape program in phase 2. It may mean that you can't do that entire exercise in its entirety, but maybe we can break it down, and we can break it down into its constituent elements, and you start off there and build from there on. So the short answer to when should you move on, as soon as you're able to stand up watching this video, is a pretty good start. And don't worry, it's going to be difficult, but we've got all the support that you need to make sure that you can get through that process effectively. As we move into phase 2, it can be difficult, as I mentioned, and a nice 1-2-1 strategy is a perfect one. And it's worth boiling this down and really distilling this, because it is imperative again for the future phases of Back in Shape. You should know that doing Back in Shape routine in phase 1, you should be doing phase 1 once in the morning, and this should take you around about 15 to 20 minutes once you've grasped the mechanics of the routine itself. And then we should do it again for 20 minutes or so, which is about how long it takes in the middle of the day. And then again, once later on in the afternoon stroke early evening. There may be some nuanced changes that you might do for your own personal circumstances and work-life balance, and that's perfectly fine. But we should aim for doing phase 1 3 times a day when you're in phase 1. Now, when you're moving up into phase 2, we suggest normally that you place phase 2 in the middle of the day. It's when we're most likely to be in a position to work well, both mentally and physically. We've been up around, moving around a little bit, etc. So in that scenario, when you first move into phase 2, we still do phase 1 in the morning for that 15-20 minutes. We then do our phase 2 routine. Maybe it's early afternoon, 1-2 p.m. in the afternoon, maybe a little bit earlier, maybe a little bit later. And then we do our phase 1 in the evening again, remembering that phase 1 when you're in phase 1 is there to help provide relief and education around those specific exercises. But when we're in phase 2, phase 3 and phase 4, phase 1 is there to oppose the daily tasks that put stress and strain on our body. Our body, we're starting to do physical exercises. We're starting to do a little bit more around the house, as so often happens when pain levels drop. So the incorporation of that phase 1 routine in the morning and phase 1 in the afternoon is really quite vital to combat some of the extra strain that will inevitably be going through your body. It's very important, don't miss it out. A nice easy way, if you are a little bit more concerned, because this first step into phase 2 is often such a big one for many people, up here more than down here in the body. It is to do phase 2 or incorporate phase 2 on, let's just suppose we start on Monday, day 1. And we do phase 1 in the morning, phase 2 in the middle of the day, and phase 1 in the afternoon or evening. And then the next day on Tuesday, day 2, we just do phase 1, phase 1, phase 1. And that's fine. Give our body time to adapt. And then on day 3, we're then going to go back and do phase 1, phase 2, phase 1. We should be shooting for that 3 sets of 10 repetitions on those exercises as per the instructions, and you've got plenty of that in Back in Shape. That's very, very important that we aim for those, but don't be disheartened if the first time you move into this routine, into phase 2, you're only able to do 3, 5. We've had people in the membership that have started on half a rep to start with. Week 1, day 1 of phase 2, they're doing half a rep of each of the exercises. But with perseverance, that half rep becomes 2 reps, and that 2 reps becomes 4, and before you know it, you're doing 3 sets of 10, but it only comes with perseverance and a little bit of creativity, and that's what we've got in the Back in Shape for you. One final thing before we move into the discussion on progressing on to phase 3 is that we have a whole host of different people that have been through the Back in Shape program. They've got conditions such as spondylosis, spondylolisthesis, degenerative disc disease, herniated discs, bulging discs. You've got post-surgery, we've got post-fusion where people have hardware in the spine, and everything in between. The biggest concern for people is, what about my particular case? Is this safe for me? The principles, the premise of the Back in Shape. By now you should maybe already know this, but if you haven't already grasped that, you will over the subsequent lessons, is to provide stability to the spine. And no matter what your condition, stability and protection for the spine is vital if an injury is to recover. So the only point I would say to you is, to the degree your condition is quote unquote more severe, more objectively worse, there's maybe more damage or history to the spine, really the greater that is the case, the more focus you have to place on technique. And that's why we've gone to such lengths to provide adequate and really above and beyond coaching videos and support on all of these exercises, as well as the support that we offer in the Facebook group for all of you premium members. It's really so important that we make sure we give you guys the support necessary to help you learn how to do these exercises effectively and overcome the biggest barrier, which is not knowing what you don't know. And that's where understanding your condition is 100% relevant, but the more severe that condition is, the more we need to follow the plan to the letter and can deviate from it the least. That brings us to the exciting prospect of moving on to phase 3. Now, if you've been through phase 2, you will have done the 3 sets of 10, you will have progressed on to 4 sets of 10, and then the 5 sets of 10. Once you're at this level of intensity, we need to make the step into phase 3. Phase 3 is where we take those exercises that have been done in phase 2, predominantly off weight bearing, starting to strengthen our core up and develop greater control and protection for the spine. And we start to add in the element of the real world, the gravity. Now bear in mind, as I mentioned in some of the previous parts of this video, you're already doing tasks, you're already doing daily tasks, you're probably emptying the dishwasher, you might be getting out of bed, you might be getting off the toilet. All of these tasks, again, are vastly more stressful on the body than the phase 2 exercises. So always look first at the daily tasks you may be doing as root causes of some of the re-aggravations, etc., that one may experience as they're recovering from back pain. It's so important and often so overlooked. We always look at the one thing we're doing, a routine, that is so controlled at the expense of looking at everything else, which is often where the culprits lie. Now, as we move into phase 3, we are going to be doing strengthening work. We're going to be building that intensity in an upright manner. And again, the same principles hold true as did in phase 2. We're there to focus on breaking down the technique where the exercise is a little bit too challenging for us into smaller ranges of motion. Maybe we're breaking it down into slightly fewer reps. That's okay too. But you have to make that step into phase 3 because, as you will see, it's going to work not only this midsection, but up and down the body so that everything can work as a unit, as a whole, as it's intended to do. The great thing about the phase 3 is that we are incorporating a means of increasing the resistance. The biggest problem with bodyweight exercises only is there is a limit to how much bodyweight we can use without contorting ourselves into all sorts of difficult positions. And this is the real problem with so many of those at-home floor-only routines. We have to make the step on to a strengthening based program that incorporates things like resistance bands and or weights. And resistance bands are a great one because we can really vary the level of resistance we use by, again, doubling up bands or using stronger or weaker bands. And this allows us to start to not only add gravity, but also add other forces so we can be more creative. We can allow ourselves on the exercise to put our spine in a neutral position and use the bands to stimulate the force rather than putting the body in strange positions. This also allows us, as we go through the 3 sets of 10, 4 sets of 10, 5 sets of 10, and if it's your fancy, 5 sets of 15, we are able to use stronger bands once we get to that top end and say, hey, I'll knock the band up for this particular exercise because it's starting to get a little bit too easy, and you should be doing that and you should be looking to do that. And it's okay when you move into phase 3 and maybe you've upped the bands or just that first transition in, you feel a little bit sore in certain areas where muscles haven't been used in a long time. But the incorporation of those bands has allowed us to work those muscles and start to benefit from their partaking in the protection of the lower back and the protection of the core and the protection of your spine. Now, what about flexibility? We mentioned it back in phase 1. We were talking about that in this video, and we haven't really touched on it since. But as you go through phase 3 and you move towards that 4 and 5 sets of 10, we're starting to make real change in the body. We're really starting to get stronger in the legs, in the core, and in the back muscles. And now is the time to work on flexibility. We discussed this much more in the flexibility program itself, but once you move into that phase 3 and you're at that desired intensity, incorporating the flexibility program to further enhance your results is really the right time to do that. And we'll have that whole unit there where you can go and understand more about why it's the right time and why phase 1 right now, maybe when you're watching this video, why that is the worst possible time to start working on flexibility. Because best case scenario, it's ineffective and a waste of time, and worst case scenario, especially if you're one of the more hypermobile or generally flexible, it's going to actually create more instability for your back to have to juggle and manage whilst you're trying to recover from that injury. So flexibility needs to be added in at the right time. As you've no doubt noticed throughout this program, even though maybe you haven't even got your teeth into it just yet, there is a hell of a lot of education that goes alongside the practical exercise based videos. That education is there to help you understand what has led to the back pain and the habits and the way in which we should be using our body on a daily basis to make sure that it doesn't come back in the future. Sometimes I do think back pain and recovering from back pain is somewhat like a diet. Diets, they do work. You do lose weight when you do a diet. When you stop doing the diet, you generally put the weight back on. Many of us can either personally or know someone else that can relate to this particular phenomenon. The trick with back pain is you will go through the phase 1, the phase 2, the phase 3 process, and you will make improvement. Your body will get stronger again. But if you go back to those old habits and those old workouts and jumping up and down around the place and doing all sorts of high impact workouts, we're going to end up going back and getting off diet and doing these wrong things again. And that can lead to real trouble and relapses. And that cycle often is more depressing than the actual back pain itself. Not being able to get out of the blocks, being able to get over the back pain, but then finding yourself back there as soon as you start to do a workout. And that's why we created phase 4. Phase 4 is there to provide you, as someone who wants to continue to work out and knows all the benefits of physical exercise that can have on both your health and your mindset. But you want to make sure that that workout is vetted. It's something that's going to be safe for your back to do. So there you have the Phase 4 library of workouts, which are there to help give you a way of continuing to build strength to protect your lower back, to protect your body in general, hips, knees, etc. Keep them strong and keep them free from injury. But you also know that those are the right sort of exercises for you. You don't finish the Back in Shape program and jump back into doing endless sit-ups and Russian twists. You've got a routine base, or a couple of routines that you can use to actually further your general health and well-being and continue the habits that you've developed that are so integral and so vital to your success in going through the Back in Shape program. You've got a means of continuing those beyond the end of Phase 3. Hopefully you found this overview really helpful and helped just give you a bit of guidance about which way you are going and what lies ahead of you. It's a great journey, and it's one that many people before you have been on and had great success with. Follow the program. The support is all there inside the Back in Shape members area. And also, if you are one of the ones that end up joining us in the premium membership, then we'd love to welcome you there into the Facebook group and onto our live streams, where we can support you even more and give you that extra level of guidance to make sure that you really do properly get your back in shape for good.